wealthy woman get home safely, only to discover that one act of kindness will change his entire life and make him the unexpected owner of a Japanese restaurant. The woman slid off the bar stool like a toppled mannequin. Her luxury Italian dress, worth more than Andre's monthly rent, was drenched in spilled top-shelf sake. It was 2:30 a.m. at the Sakura Palace, and Andre Santos knew his shift should have ended long ago. Instead, he stood there watching one of Manhattan's richest regulars wobble dangerously close to the marble staircase. "Ma'am, let me help you," he said carefully. At 26, Andre had learned to be cautious. Wealthy guests could be unpredictable, especially after a night of drinking, and a young black man offering help was too often misunderstood. "I don't need anyone's pity," she mumbled, clutching the cherrywood wall for balance. Her platinum blonde hair was tangled, her makeup blurred. But even in that state, Andre recognized her instantly. Victoria Steinberg, heiress to the hotel empire that practically owned half the East Coast. Andre hesitated. Over the past months, he'd noticed the strange tension whenever Victoria arrived, whispering, stopping mid-sentence, worried glances, sudden silence, especially from manager Morrison and his friends from the corporate office. "Look, I'll just call a ride for you," Andre said softly. "It's not safe for you to walk around like this." Victoria blinked at him, trying to focus. "You're not like the others," she said. "Why are you being kind to me? Everyone else only wants something." Andre didn't know how to answer. Maybe it was because he'd grown up watching his mother work 16-hour days to raise 3 kids. Maybe he simply understood what it felt like to be alone and vulnerable. Or maybe it was because Sakura Palace had begun to feel off, like things weren't what they seemed. While they waited for the Uber, Victoria murmured something about real people and second chances. Andre assumed it was the alcohol talking, but he memorized the address she gave him anyway. A penthouse worth more than anything he'd ever owned. What Andre didn't know was that the restaurant's security cameras recorded everything, and someone very sober had been watching. The next day, Andre walked into Sakura Palace expecting a normal shift. He didn't expect Hiroshi Tanaka, the executive chef, to greet him with an uneasy expression. "Andre, I need you in my office. Now." Andre's stomach tightened. In 3 years there, nothing good ever came from being called into the office, especially when the regional manager, James Morrison, was waiting with that smile that always meant trouble. Morrison specialized in the kind of prejudice people pretend doesn't exist, never saying anything direct, but making his intentions painfully clear through professional concerns and company standards. Andre had learned to read these signals long ago. "Sit," Morrison said, flipping through a folder slowly. "We received complaints about your behavior toward guests. It appears you crossed certain lines." Andre's eyebrows rose. "What lines?" Morrison leaned back. "Approaching impaired clients, providing unsolicited assistance. Some may interpret that as you taking advantage of delicate situations, especially with someone of Mrs. Steinberg's status." The accusation hit Andre like a blow. He instantly knew what Knight Morrison meant, but hearing the story twisted into something ugly left him speechless. "I helped her get home safely," Andre said calmly, despite feeling his anger rise. Anyone with a conscience would have done the same. Morrison's cold smile widened as he opened his briefcase and pulled out printed security snapshots. Yes, that's what the footage shows. The issue isn't what you meant, Andre. It's the way things look. Our clientele has expectations, and we can't risk confusion caused by employees who don't understand their boundaries." The silence that followed was suffocating. In that moment, Andre realized it didn't matter how hard he worked. It didn't matter how many guests praised him. To Morrison, he would always be a potential problem. Always someone who didn't know his place. "So what are you saying?" Andre asked, though deep down he already knew the answer. "I'm saying," Morrison replied smoothly, "that you might want to explore other opportunities, somewhere more fitting for someone with your profile." But neither of them had any idea that across the city, Victoria Steinberg was having a completely different conversation, one that would change Andre's life forever and expose long-hidden secrets inside Sakura Palace. Because the truth was this: Victoria had been far more clear-headed that night than anyone realized. And what she discovered about Morrison's hiring practices was about to blow open in a way no one at the restaurant would ever forget. If you've ever felt judged before you even had a chance to speak, you know that sometimes justice needs a little help from above. Subscribe to the channel to see how a simple act of kindness sparked the most unexpected turnaround an elite restaurant had ever witnessed. The following Friday, the resignation notice arrived wrapped in polished corporate wording, delivered by a nervous intern who avoided Andre's eyes the entire time. Operating cost cuts, that was the official excuse. But everyone knew the reality. Morrison had finally gotten what he wanted. Andre folded the uniform he had worn for 3 years, smoothing each crease before placing it in his locker for the last time. Around him, co-workers stood in stiff silence, some truly sorry, others quietly relieved that they weren't the next target. Chef Hiroshi approached quietly and slipped an envelope into Andre's hand. "Your tips from the last 6 months," he whispered. "I kept everything separate. They're yours." The walk-home rain drifted down the October sky as Andre walked home, the city lights blurring in the wet streets. He called his mother. Rosa Santos, still on her night shift cleaning an office building on Wall Street, always answered on the first ring. "Mom, I lost my job." Rosa believed in being direct. "So, did you do something wrong?" "No," Andre said. "I did something right." There was a pause. Rosa knew immediately there was a bigger story behind those words. "Come home. We'll talk." Back in Queens, the 2-bedroom apartment smelled the same as always: detergent, strong coffee, and the steady determination that had built their entire family. Rosa arrived at 6 a.m., still in her uniform, and found Andre at the table surrounded by papers. "What's all this?" she asked, pouring coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. "I'm trying to make sense of something that happened at work," Andre said, showing her his notes. "Remember that supervisor at Goldman Sachs who always sent you to the toughest floors for no reason?" Rosa's expression darkened. "Thompson, 20 years of cleaning offices without one complaint, and suddenly everything I did was a problem. Only because I refused to let him walk over me." "That's exactly what happened to me," Andre said. "Morrison did the same thing, just dressed it up better." He explained everything. Victoria's incident, the twisted accusations, the patterns he'd started noticing. Employees of color reassigned or fired for tiny mistakes, while others faced no consequences at all. Rosa took his hand. "Sometimes life forces you to choose accept unfair treatment or stand against it. You know which one I've always chosen." For the first time in days, Andre smiled. His mother had raised 3 children alone after losing her husband in a work accident. She'd faced unfair bosses, wealthy clients who talked down to her, and a society that tried to shrink her spirit. And not once did she bow her head. "What are you going to do?" she asked gently. "I'm not sure," Andre said, "but I'm not pretending nothing happened." Monday, Andre returned to Sakura Palace, this time as a customer. He chose a corner table and watched the room with new eyes. Morrison moved through the dining area with the strut of a man who believed the place belonged to him, showering attention on wealthy white guests while completely ignoring tables with customers of color. That's when Andre noticed something. Victoria Steinberg walked in, alone. She asked quietly for a seat at the bar. Morrison practically ran to greet her, all smiles and bows, instantly switching into his performance mode. But to his surprise, Victoria dismissed him with a cold wave, preferring to sit alone, quietly observing the entire restaurant. Andre realized she was doing exactly what he was: watching, noting, studying the patterns most people never noticed. Their eyes met for a split second. Victoria gave him a small, subtle nod, a signal, a promise, a warning, or the beginning of something much bigger. That night, Andre received a message from an unfamiliar number. "Coffee tomorrow at 9. Corner Deli on 72nd and Columbus. We have a lot to discuss. V." He stared at the screen for a long time. 3 years at Sakura Palace had taught him one thing. People like Victoria Steinberg didn't reach out to people like him without a very specific purpose. And considering Morrison had used her name to push him out, Andre had a feeling this purpose was going to be interesting. He opened the drawer of his desk. Inside was a small notebook filled with everything he'd quietly observed at Sakura Palace: dates, unusual shifts, odd conversations, guests who received special treatment that made no sense. He had collected notes without fully understanding why. Some instinct told him these details mattered. Looking at the pages now, Andre realized something. Morrison hadn't rushed to fire him by accident. People who notice patterns can be dangerous, especially when there are things to hide. Every humiliation Morrison delivered had only sharpened something inside Andre's silent resolve, forming under pressure like a buried gemstone. What Morrison never understood was that each act of disrespect was carving out his own downfall. When Andre lowered his gaze in the office that day, Morrison mistook it for defeat. But real strength grows quietly fed by the steady fire of someone who knows they deserve far more than the world has offered them. Corner Deli, 72nd Street. The Corner Deli was the type of place that rarely saw millionaires, worn tables, heavy ceramic mugs, and the constant smell of fried bacon in the air. Andre arrived 10 minutes early and chose a booth in the back, still struggling to believe that Victoria Steinberg wanted to meet him. She walked in at exactly 9 show. Jeans, simple blouse, hair loose. Yet Andre sensed the effortless wealth anyway. Without makeup, without the glamorous armor she wore at the restaurant, she looked almost ordinary until she spoke. "You were dismissed because of me," she said immediately, sitting across from him. "Morrison told corporate that I filed a harassment report." Andre nodded. "That's what he claimed." "That's a lie." She took out her phone and held it toward him. On the screen was an email from Sakura Palace thanking her for his exceptional assistance and requesting that she congratulate the staff member who helped her. Andre read it twice. Same date, same time. The whole complaint was fabricated. "Why are you showing me this?" Andre asked. Victoria's smile was tight, humorless. "Because my company holds a significant share in the group funding Sakura Palace's expansion. And because for the past 6 months I've been investigating a very clear pattern of discrimination in their hiring and firing decisions." Andre felt his heartbeat change rhythm. "You knew I'd be fired." "I suspected it," Victoria said. "Morrison has a track record. 3 black employees dismissed in the last year, all for minor issues that other staff commit every day. A Latino waiter pushed into the kitchen right after receiving glowing compliments from guests. You were next." She opened a folder and slid documents across the table: contracts, performance notes, customer comments. Andre recognized names of co-workers who had simply vanished from the schedule. "Morrison is slowly building a front-of-house staff that looks exactly the way he wants it to," Victoria explained. "He keeps a few Latinos in the kitchen, so nothing seems obvious. But anyone black in a visible role eventually gets sidelined." Andre traced the pages with his fingers. "How did you get all of this?" "I'm an investor. I have access to HR reports," she said. Then she hesitated. "And I have personal reasons for wanting Morrison held responsible." What came next was an hour of Victoria's own story. She told him how Morrison repeatedly ignored her proposals for diversity programs, how he spoke to her in patronizing tones about appropriate clientele whenever she pushed for inclusion, and how she discovered he was quietly filtering not only employees, but also customers based on his own vision of who belonged. "That night you helped me," Victoria continued. "I wasn't actually drunk. I was testing how the staff responds to someone who seems vulnerable." She leaned back. "Morrison saw me walk in and vanished straight into his office. You were the only one who offered to help," Victoria said quietly. Andre leaned back in his chair, trying to process everything. "So the situation was staged?" "The setup was, yes, but your response wasn't." She held his gaze. "You genuinely cared about someone who looked vulnerable. That told me everything I needed to know about your character." Victoria opened her laptop and revealed a detailed presentation: hiring charts by ethnicity, retention data, promotion records. The evidence against Morrison was laid out with scientific precision. "I'm building a lawsuit for systematic discrimination," she explained. "I need employees willing to testify." Andre studied the documents, then looked up at her. "And you think I can convince people to take that risk? Most of them have families to feed." "That's exactly why I need you as a coordinator," Victoria replied. "You know the staff. You know who can be trusted." She closed the laptop. "And there's something else," I'm offering you the chance to manage a new Japanese restaurant my company's opening in Harlem, shared ownership, profit sharing with employees, and clear diversity policies from day one. Andre didn't speak for a long moment. It was almost too good to be real. But at the same time, it made perfect sense. Victoria Steinberg did not give handouts. She made strategic decisions. So what's the real reason? He finally asked. This time her smile held genuine respect. Morrison underestimated me because I'm a woman and because I'm young. He's underestimating you because you're black and because he sees you as just a waiter. People like him make the same prideful mistakes over and over again. Andre thought of his mother, of the overdue bills, of the years he'd spent swallowing disrespect small and large at Sakura Palace. He thought of the co-workers who had disappeared quietly from the schedule, the subtle jokes, the looks that said, "Know your place." "If I do this," Andre said slowly, "it won't just be about getting a better job. It'll be about making sure Morrison finally faces the consequences of what he's done." Victoria extended her hand. "That's exactly why I chose you." 2 weeks of quiet strategy. That afternoon, Andre called 3 former coworkers. 2 agreed to meet. The third, Marcus, still worked in the kitchen and was willing to discreetly document what continued to happen inside the restaurant. Over the next 2 weeks, Andre became someone Morrison could never have imagined, a precise, strategic organizer. He collected statements, recorded permitted phone conversations, and photographed documents that Marcus quietly provided. Each new piece of evidence revealed the scale of the discrimination. Morrison wasn't just being biased. He was deliberately crafting an environment shaped entirely around his own notions of superiority. Meanwhile, Morrison continued his routine, confident, arrogant, and completely unaware that every smug comment, every unfair decision was being quietly preserved. The arrogance that made him feel untouchable was becoming the very thing that would destroy him. One afternoon, when Morrison smiled with satisfaction at forcing yet another Latino employee into a less visible position, he believed he had succeeded in shaping his perfect little world. But true justice doesn't shout. It grows quietly, fueled by the patience of people who know that the most powerful victories are the ones the opponent never sees coming. The meeting, Monday morning, 10 a.m., Sakura Palace corporate office. Morrison walked in confidently, expecting a simple meeting with investors about operational efficiency. He didn't know that Andre was watching everything from a conference room upstairs through a live feed. Victoria entered with 2 lawyers and a representative from the Corporate Ethics Board. Morrison greeted them with his usual polished smile, straightening his expensive tie like a man preparing to receive praise. "Mr. Morrison," Victoria began, opening a thick folder, "we need to discuss certain hiring and firing practices that have come to our attention." Morrison let out a small laugh. "Of course, we're always open to improvements. I hope you've noticed how I've maintained the restaurant's high standards by removing problematic elements." One of the lawyers switched on the projector. A detailed chart appeared. The last 18 months, 100% of black front-of-house employees dismissed, 80% of Latino staff moved to less visible positions, 0 white employees disciplined for similar issues. Morrison's smile stiffened. "These numbers? Well, statistical coincidences happen. Coincidences." Victoria pressed the remote again. The next slide displayed transcripts, real quotes, recorded from Morrison's own conversations. His comments about appropriate clientele, fitting the establishment, and certain types of people not belonging in visible roles. His face drained of color. Morrison instructing supervisors to find something on certain employees. Morrison bragging about cleaning house. The color drained from his face. How did you get this? These recordings are illegal," he sputtered. "Actually," the second lawyer replied calmly, "every recording was made with the consent of at least one person in the conversation, all perfectly legal." Victoria clicked again. Internal emails, photos of HR documents, signed statements from former staff. And then the final blow, a video of Morrison in his office, alone, raising a glass of champagne and saying, "One more problem solved." Morrison froze. Who recorded this?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "Someone you completely underestimated," Victoria answered. Someone who worked here for 3 years, watching you, taking notes, documenting every single discriminatory choice you made. The door opened. Andre stepped inside holding a large box of files. Morrison looked at him as if he'd seen a ghost. You, Morrison breathed. Impossible. You're just a waiter you thought would be easy to get rid of. Andre finished, placing the box on the table. You're right. That's exactly who I was. Until you taught me that people like me have to be twice as smart and twice as strategic to survive people like you. Andre lifted the lid of the box. Inside was months of meticulous documentation. Emails printed, conversations logged, statements neatly categorized, witnesses listed. You created such a clear pattern, Andre said, that even a blind jury could recognize it. Morrison shot up from his chair, desperate to regain control. This is a setup. You can't prove anything. I know important people. I have connections. Victoria's smile was icy. You had connections, she corrected. Past tense. She checked her watch. In approximately 15 minutes, this meeting will be shared with the local press. In 30 minutes, every current employee of Sakura Palace will receive all of this documentation, and in 1 hour, the corporate board will vote to terminate your position for cause. Morrison's face turned beet red. Sweat ran down his temples. You can't do this to me. I built this place. I upheld the standards. The standards you upheld, Andre replied, voice steady, were based on exclusion, hostility, and abuse of authority. You didn't build anything. You simply tried to break the people who were better than you. Victoria rose to her feet. Mr. Morrison, your employment is terminated for systematic discrimination, creating a hostile work environment, and violating corporate diversity policies. Your benefits are revoked. Your references will include a full report, and you will face legal action personally. Morrison staggered back, gripping the desk. You've ruined my life. 20 years of my career. No, Andre said, locking eyes with the man who once tried to humiliate him. You ruined your own life the moment you decided your position gave you the right to destroy the dignity of others. I simply documented what you chose to do. Security escorted Morrison out. Andre watched from the window as the man who once played king tried frantically to call every contact he had, only to realize word of his downfall had already spread. His reputation built on a hollow foundation was collapsing in real time. Victoria turned to Andre. How do you feel? Andre inhaled deeply. Not vindicated, just free, like I can finally breathe without fear or judgment. Outside, Morrison stood alone, holding a cardboard box, his legacy dissolving before his eyes. Victoria looked at Andre with true admiration. You know, she said, you could have taken the job and walked away from all of this. Andre smiled for the first time in weeks. My mother used to say that when you have the power to make things better, choosing not to act is still a choice. I chose to act. As Morrison walked away from Sakura Palace for the last time, one question hovered in the air. Can someone who built his identity on superiority ever truly understand the harm he caused? Or are some beliefs so deeply rooted that even complete defeat cannot uproot them? 6 months later, Andre stood in the middle of what used to be an abandoned warehouse in Harlem, watching designers transform the space into something Morrison could never have imagined. Kibo, the Japanese word for hope, would not simply be another Japanese restaurant. It would be a message, a mission, a quiet revolution. Victoria had kept her promise, actually. She had exceeded it. Andre wasn't just the manager. He was a co-owner, holding 30% of the shares and full authority to hire, train, and build the team. Even more groundbreaking, every employee would receive a share of the profits, something almost unheard of in the industry. How many former Sakura Palace employees did you bring on? Victoria asked, reviewing the new staff roster. Everyone who wanted to join, Andre replied with a grin. And a few Morrison got rid of years ago. Jenny is our head server, Marcus is running the kitchen, and Hiroshi agreed to be our cultural consultant. The irony was delicious. For years, Morrison had bragged about maintaining standards by pushing out talented employees because of how they looked. Now those same people were building something that made Sakura Palace seem outdated and out of touch. Andre's phone buzzed. It was his mother. Son, I just saw a story about you in the paper. Are you sure this isn't a dream? Andre laughed softly. The article had just been published. Former waiter who faced discrimination opens groundbreaking restaurant in Harlem. The photo showed Andre surrounded by a diverse, genuinely smiling team, the exact opposite of the tense atmosphere Morrison once ruled over. It's real, Mom, and there's more. Remember what we said about dignity at work? I'm building a place where people feel respected from day one. Meanwhile, across town, Morrison faced a very different reality. The lawsuit filed by Andre and other employees had escalated into a federal case. His once powerful contacts stopped answering his calls. The man who once walked around like nothing could touch him now struggled to get interviews for entry-level management jobs. Kibbo opens its doors. On opening night, Andre looked around the full dining room and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Real pride. Not the empty pride Morrison fed on belittling others to feel superior, but the pride of building something meaningful. Kibbo was an instant sensation. Reservations filled up for months. Critics praised the food, the environment, the culture of respect. Staff members worked with confidence and customers felt welcome, regardless of who they were or where they came from. During the evening rush, Marcus walked over. Chef, Table 12 wants to thank you personally. They said they have never felt so respected in a restaurant. Andre approached the table. An older couple smiled warmly. We just wanted to thank you, the woman said. It's been so long since we felt genuinely welcome. Moments like that reminded Andre why he had fought, not for revenge, but to build a place where no one would ever feel the way he once did at Sakura Palace. 1 year later, Andre sat in his office reviewing proposals for a second location in Brooklyn. His mother had finally retired. Andre insisted on covering her expenses so she could rest after decades of hard work. The staff had become a true family. As for Morrison, the last Andre heard, he was working as an assistant manager at a small fast food chain in the suburbs. Life had a strange sense of symmetry. The man who once judged others now depended on employers willing to give him a second chance. Andre looked out the window at the rhythm of Harlem people of all backgrounds walking past, stopping to read Kibbo's menu. This was the community Morrison tried to exclude. Now they were the foundation of Andre's success. The best revenge was never about destroying Morrison. It was about building something so positive, so impactful, that everything Morrison stood for simply became irrelevant. Morrison tried to diminish Andre, but in the end, he exposed his own emptiness. Andre learned the truth. Real victory isn't about tearing others down. It's about rising far beyond what they believed you were capable of. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who believed they were above you, you already know. Success speaks louder than anything. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that sometimes being rejected by the wrong people is the first step toward finding exactly where you're meant to be.